everyone, welcome to another Meet the 818 interview. Today we have Mr. Dustin Staats, owner and creator of Board Gaming with Education. Hello, Dustin.
Hi, Dan. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Of course, of course. So tell us about Board Gaming with Education, what made you create it, and pretty much just the origin story of the whole thing.
For sure. Yeah, we're right now, maybe when we get to one of the other questions at the end about our future, right now we're an online board game community and store. We sell board games from different publishers. So um, we carry different games like science-based games, math-based games, ELA, history, and then we also carry some family-friendly games just for fun. And we develop learning resources for teachers and parents to use those games at home and to learn how they can incorporate different skills or content area opportunities for learning through the game.
Got it, got it. And if I am not mistaken, you're an English teacher.
Yeah. Well, I teach part-time at a high school now. I teach like some board game classes actually. But my background is mainly in English language education. I've taught abroad for let's see, like 6 years, and then 6 years in the US. This is my education career. And that's actually how we started, as board gaming with English. My wife and I, we got married in Los Angeles, and then we moved to Taiwan to live in Taiwan for 3 years.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, it was awesome. I miss it, but I'm happy to be back in LA, back in the Valley. Um, but yeah, we started as board game with English. I convinced a friend from grad school to come and also come move to Taiwan with me, and we started the podcast. And it was just a podcast for English language learners and English language teachers. And then my wife and I knew that we were going to be moving back to the States, and I knew that there were other like teachers listening to the podcast that weren't English teachers. So we're like, well, why don't we expand out this idea, because these tabletop games can definitely be used for more than just language learning. You could use it, like I mentioned, for science, history, and English language arts. We moved back to the Valley, and we started events well, I don't know how long ago, but before the pandemic.
Of course.
Yeah. So we started doing some events, and we were hosting board game nights, and we hosted in a little area. Oh man, I mentioned I'm not familiar with there. Kind of by the Warner Center.
Oh, okay. So Woodland Hills.
Yeah, in Woodland Hills, and we were hosting some events, and we were doing board game nights about, I think, once a month or every other week. And it was starting to grow, and then the pandemic hit. So then we kind of shifted. I even hosted like a week-long challenge for educators to talk about how you can use tabletop games online, because that was like the thing with the tabletop industry with board games. Like, those are meant to be social, meant to be played in person. Exactly. And that just kind of disrupted the industry. And I was just kind of helping teachers realize, oh, you can use them online still.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, that was crazy. I mean, that must have been pretty challenging for you guys, like having to convert a format that's meant to be in person to something that's completely not.
Yeah, right. Yeah. What's awesome though is there are so many games that can be played virtually, and that's what we found out this last year. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what inspired you to start this business from the get-go? Like, what was, was it just like one time you were thinking about it and said, you know what would be great? Board games and learning. Bam.
Kind of. Yeah, I guess always as a teacher, I've always used games in my classroom to some extent, but it's I've always wanted to challenge myself in how I use those games, and been very conscious about why I'm using them and how to engage my students with them. And then what I realized is I was getting kind of into tabletop games, and now like our big mission is to push this idea of game-based learning, and getting teachers familiar with the idea of learning through play. So not using play necessarily as a reward or a way to sugarcoat learning, but where we have students actually learn through playing games.
So quick question. I know this wasn't on the outline.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
But as a teacher, did you find that incorporating your lessons into the games made the make students learn more, or like is that learning experience better versus to just, you know, straight classroom learning?
Mm.
Did you, you know, was there a difference, or did you feel that they were more engaged? Engaged was the word I was looking for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, I did some preliminary research in the university I taught at in Taiwan, and that was my research, is to see if students were more engaged with using a game for language learning or not. And the results of the study that I conducted with my students, every student but one said they are more likely to want to learn English if there was a game involved. Um, so yes, for sure, for English language learning, and based on some of the research I compiled for literature review, there's other research that supports that too. Um, but again, I think as a teacher, we have to be very conscious and aware of how we're using the game and why we're using the game. Because if we're, I mean, games are just fine to do to build relationships in your class and have those moments with your students.
Mhm.
But if you're using it too often, it becomes something that students can take advantage of and not necessarily look at the game as a way to learn.
Got it, got it. So before you started your business, or this started, how was your approach to teaching through board games taken by your colleagues or the community in general?
Yeah, that's that's always a really good question, and I think uh, I think teachers and parents know that they're really beneficial, know that they're very helpful.
Mhm.
And one thing that's a challenge, and it's a challenge in the broader educational system. And there's a really good like meme cartoon that exemplifies this, and it's in the cartoon there's a picture of like 4 or 5 different animals: a goldfish, a monkey, seal, an elephant. And
Mhm.
the teacher in the comic says, in order to give you a fair, fair idea of who will perform the best, you have to climb this tree. A goldfish can't climb a tree, right? Its ability is swimming. An
Right.
elephant is like a big strong animal, it's not supposed to climb a tree. So it's this idea that our education system kind of has this idea of, well, we're evaluating students on a test. And yes, that's the way we can evaluate students, but it's not, maybe not the best way. And we know all our students have different strengths. um, and that's kind of the same idea with game-based learning and using games in the classroom. Like, we know they work, but the education system as a whole hasn't really adapted this idea. So it's a challenge to kind of help teachers realize how they can use it as part of like learning standards. So all teachers have to follow different learning standards in their classroom, and looking at games and aligning the game with learning outcomes that match those standards.
Got it, got it. And just for our viewers that are not familiar with tabletop, well, not that they wouldn't be, but so for example, classroom scenario, you know, just kind of like throw out a board game, or how would that work? Kind of walk us through that experience as a student, and you being the teacher, how would you, you know, just a sample scenario.
Yeah, no, for sure. So one game that has been very popular recently, and I've really liked it, I used during the pandemic too because it
Mhm,
can be used remotely, is called Monstrosity.
mhm.
And in this game, you look at a picture of a monster, and you have 30 seconds to memorize what that monster looks like. Then you have to put the picture down and you explain it to all the other players. All the other players are drawing that monster. So of course you have different drawings, but if you're a good explainer, if you remember the picture well, uh, everyone's can hopefully look pretty similar, but usually they're very different. Um, and then you look back at that monster. You look at back at everybody's drawing without looking at your card. You have to think about, okay, what did my monster look like, and which one looks similar to mine. So that's like the whole game in a sense. There's points to it, but um, well, you can use that game for looking at descriptive language. So how you can write descriptive language, or you can use it as a game for giving and following directions and communication, some soft skills. So there's that game's not meant to be played for learning, right? But what
Mhm.
we do at Board Game and Education, we look at these tabletop games and look at, well, what can we pull from this game to help teachers use to align with their learning outcomes?
Oh, very good, very good. So it's kind of like if you were teaching an elementary kid, or you know, I'm sorry, an elementary class,
Yeah.
and you wanted to do basic math, like the game that my daughter used to play was Sleeping Queens. So you would
Mm,
introduce that um, to the class, sort of just as a math thing. So it's interesting. Like it's a math. a math and matching game. So
Yeah.
oh, that's pretty awesome. Um, could you share some successes with your students, or what's the feedback that you've gotten from your students from the board games?
Yeah. So the last, let's see, I started teaching at the high school again, local high school here, 2 or 3 weeks ago. What was, I mean, this is kind of more of a story with one student, but I got a
No.
lot of feedback that they really enjoyed the class. And even just recently, we ended one class today, was our last day. But one student, this was probably the highlight, at least as a teacher. If any teachers are out there watching, they're very familiar, or if you have parents, you're very familiar with students in the classroom remotely, they have their camera off. So as a teacher, the entire time that I was teaching remotely for the past like 6 weeks,
Oh
no
no.
one had their camera off on. So because it's part of like a voluntary thing and they don't have to come if they don't want to. So I'm like, I want them to feel as comfortable as they want and engage at whatever level they feel comfortable with. Um, but at the very last class, the very end of class, one of my students, he turned his camera on. He's like, I just wanted to turn my camera on so you know what I look like in case you see me, because he's graduating this year.
Of course.
But yeah, it was really cool to hear him like kind of thank me for the class and the experience and learning about a lot of different games too. I mean, and another thing which is kind of tooting my own horn, I had very high student reviews when I was teaching in Taiwan. And I imagine some of it was because of the games we played. Maybe my personality too, but I think that definitely helped. Using games and showing students that you're there for them and you want to try things for them is really important too.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. That's awesome. My husband's actually a teacher, so completely can relate.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So he definitely knows. Yeah.
He knows.
The remote experience. Yeah.
That remote, I've seen it from the perspective of a teacher and a student. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny.
It's an interesting experience.
Yeah.
So hats off to you guys as teachers.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you.
It's not easy doing this during the pandemic, and so you being able to incorporate the games and engaging your kids during the pandemic,
Yeah.
it's amazing. So
thank you. Yeah, no, it's been fun though. That's like, and that's why I started this board game with education. It's something I'm very passionate about.
That's good. So here's a quick question. I've been to your website and it has a lot of information. So let's say I am a first-time visitor to your website. Where would you direct me to go, just to kind of get a general sense of like, where would I go if I was looking for science? Where would I go if I was looking for something with English or history, etc.?
Right. Yeah. So our site is different than other board game sites because a lot of board game sites break it down by the type of game, like fantasy, or there's like dungeon crawlers or like card games, collectible card games. We break it down by content area. So there's a bar kind of on the left, up on the top too. It depends. So our mobile version of the site is okay. I feel like it could be more user friendly, but the desktop site, it's right there on the left. You can sort it by content area. If you're on mobile, it's like what they call a hamburger menu. It's like those 3 lines and you open it up. And you can search by content area. You can also search by grade level. So if you're a parent, you would just consider what grade your child is in and go to that grade level. And one thing that we really, really are trying to do, so my partner Roger, he is a retired science teacher and he's helped with developing science-based resources. We want to be the term they use in the board game hobby is friendly local game store. So our phone number is there, and there's also something called Ask an Edugamer Expert, and you can schedule a time, a video chat with me, and we can really just talk about your goals for picking up like a tabletop game, whether you're a teacher or parent, or if you're just looking for some games to play with friends. We have some stuff on there too. So that's one thing, is like we really want to be available to help people find games too.
Got it. What's your top 5 favorite board games that you used to teach?
Oh, used to teach too. Okay.
Well, either or. It could be, how about a top 5 favorite board games and a top 5 favorite to teach with board games?
Okay. I'll go with some that I like to teach that maybe not favorite, but definitely ones that I've used a lot. So monstrosity, I've really loved using that recently. Another one called trap words. So that's similar to taboo. If you're not familiar with taboo, you get a word like apple. You need your team to guess apple, but you cannot say tree, or George Washington, or red, maybe.
Yes.
So trap words is very much like that, but the other team creates the word you cannot say, and they're like trap words. So it's pretty exciting. I really like that one. I'm gonna have to look around here. Which I'm kind of drawing a blank.
I was like, didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
No. One that I used for my research was werewolf. And let's see, code names was another one I used quite a bit.
oh,
One
codenames
that
is fun.
Yeah, and one that worked really well, and it's kind of weird to say if people aren't familiar with the board game hobby is Pandemic. But that was like a super popular game long ago, like 2012.
Got it.
So before and it's a really cool it's a cooperative game. So I used it in English language teaching, and students in the game you have to say, let's go to Los Angeles to, cure the disease, and you kind of go around the board and you make sure this virus doesn't spread. Um, but that was a really great one because students use something called communicative based learning or teaching, and that's where you're learning the language through using the language. Um, but yeah, and then maybe I'll just name a couple of my favorite. I really liked Gloomhaven, and Dune Imperium is a new one. So if anyone's familiar with Dune, the movie, they've made some board games based off the movie, or not movie, the
So,
book.
the
The
book.
movie's coming out.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, wait a minute. It was a book. It was about
Yeah, the
basic.
movie. Yeah, the book. I guess there was an older movie too. I never saw the movie.
Oh,
Yeah.
I tried to get through the book. I couldn't, and I'm a reader.
Oh, really?
so, so for me to say that, that's huge. And I know it's a cult classic and all that.
Yeah.
Even as an older adult, I couldn't get through it.
I mean, yeah, that's some books like Game of Thrones for me. It's like I love the TV show, but then and I love to read too. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Brandon Sanderson. Then maybe
Yes.
I love his stuff. Like absolutely love it. And I tried Game of Thrones, and I'm like, I can't get into this. I'll just watch the show. But yeah.
That's funny. I mean, um, I I like both because I read it before.
Okay.
And I joke around with my husband because the last book was Dance of Dragons, and I read it when my daughter was born. Fast forward 9 years later, the next book is still not there.
Oh, jeez.
So I'm like, okay. But anyway, I'm sorry, off track.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
But I'm sorry. You had did you have any other games that you like that are your favorites?
Oh, I guess there's one more that I really love to play with friends. So you wouldn't use this in a school. You would retheme it for a school, but it's called Two Rooms and a Boom.
Two Rooms and a Boom, huh?
Yeah, and you're either on the blue team, which is the president team, or on the red team, which is the bomb team. And if you're on the blue team, you're trying to keep the president away from the bomb. And if you're on the red team, you're doing the opposite. So you definitely wouldn't use it in a school, but you could retheme it. And I've suggested this theme like cat and mouse or something. So you're like trying to keep the cat away from the mouse, or trying to put the cat next to the mouse. But
that's pretty awesome. I'm gonna have to go on your website and find that game.
Yeah.
And all the games that are shipped locally, like or do you have a storefront that they can pick it up, or anything? How would we be able to purchase games from you?
Yeah, no, we do local delivery in the valley. If you're in the San Fernando Valley, I'll come drop it off, or we do ship them. Our long-term goal, well, hopefully sooner, like this year, is our goal to open up a brick and mortar shop in the valley. We're kind of looking into some locations and stuff like that right now. That's kind of the first time I've announced that publicly. So yeah. Yeah, we're looking. That's always been the goal with this, I think, from the beginning. And even when, like, I had a tutoring business in Taiwan, and our goal was to open a space for that. And that's the goal now, is brick and mortar store with kids programming. And that's what we're doing this summer. We have some week-long programs. Like we have a junior Pokemon training club for 6 to 8-year-olds. So they we
Nice.
introduce them to the trading card game and work on some creative writing skills and reading and a bit of math too.
Got it. Got it. And is this program in person or via Zoom?
It will be in person. It's again, it's we don't have a space, so we need some enrollees to be sure enough enrollees to then find a space. So I know that's a hard ask for some parents. So
Mhm.
there is a deposit. You don't have to pay for it, and if we don't get a space, you get your deposit back. So it's very much safe to do it or to sign up and let me know. Or if you're just interested, even if there's interest, we might be able to find a space and talk to some people about finding a space for. So that's July 12th, July 12th to August 6th.
Very good.
And again, it's tough with the pandemic too. So
Of course.
like
Of course.
yeah. So it's, if you have questions, just reach out to me and I'm happy to kind of talk about like where we're at with everything too.
Of course. Of course. I was going to ask, or the last question I was going to ask was what plans you had for the future, but I think we kind of covered that. Unless there's anything else, any future projects that you have apart from the July 12th summer camp, or not
Yeah.
summer camp, Pokemon training camp.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's it. I mean, there are other programs too, like a board game design week-long class, storytelling and role-playing games, and then tabletop games and 21st century skills. So those are the four weeks. But yeah, that's it. We're excited for hopefully things returning back to normal soon too.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm curious. You said 21st century skills.
Yeah.
What does that involve?
Yeah. So looking at some games and like that's kind of what I just taught here at the local high school in person is we played some games, looked at communication. So we looked at games and what type of communication is in those games and how communication is used in the game and what are some challenges with the game and the type of communication or higher order thinking skills, executive functioning, cooperation. So things like that, just like soft skills that are really being pushed for the workplace, especially with, I guess there's a idea that AI is going to replace us all. So some of these skills can never be replaced. So I'm
Absolutely.
pushing.
Got it. I was just curious. I thought it was more like specific skills like coding or, something along those lines. That's why I was like, 21st century skills.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
We do have one game about cybersecurity, which is cool. But yeah, we do need to carry some other games about coding. But yeah, eventually.
That's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. So Dustin, if anyone's interested to find your games or follow you, where do they find you?
Yeah, boardgamewitheducation.com is the website, and we do have a newsletter. We send that out once a week. You'll need to scroll down a little bit on the main page, and you'll see that like maybe a quarter way down the page. And then any other social media, just Board Game with Education. We're watching on Instagram. We're Board Game with Education on Instagram too.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, guys, follow Dustin. Get some board games because, it's interesting and it's fun for learning. Until next time, thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.